That's the beginning of the first track on a new compilation we're about to talk about, and we'll talk about that track specifically. It's called Northern Lights. Peter Phippen is a long-time name tied to music in these parts. He's hit the refresh button a few times, as many good musicians do in a lifetime, reinventing musical selves in ways that both challenge and complement the others. Another name synonymous with music and the inquisitive nature that collects instruments of many shapes and sizes, plus turns a recording studio into a laboratory, is Ivar Lunde Jr., a music professor emeritus, often associated with chamber music and orchestras. He and Peter made a past connection, and if there's an equivalent to scratching each other's backs, well, they're doing it. There's a new collection of music available called Into the Ancient, where Peter introduces both his breath and big parts of himself into flutes of many sizes and ages, and Ivar settles into the studio to do whatever his experience and imagination can muster. You guys have been working together for quite some time now. I'm curious how and when you guys first decided that working together might be fun. I wish I could ask each of you independently to see the difference or not in how you answer this. Why does it work so well, do you think? Who wants to go first?
Peter goes first. He's the one that sought me out, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. Someone had told me that Ivar had a really nice studio, and I went in there to check it out, and it was an excellent studio. And of course, you know, Ivar has an amazing ear and he's an amazing musician. And it's good to have people that are better than you surrounding you. So when I come to Ivar with concepts, ideas, you know, I can always count on him to give me a direct and truthful answer, whether I want that answer or not.
Yeah.
That's very helpful, actually. And Ivar's become a mentor. He might not want to say that, but I say it because he definitely has.
So, Ivar, when Peter showed up with his stuff, how attuned were you to what it was he was doing, or is music?
Well, I have heard of Peter for a long time, actually, because we had other friends in common. Actually, Keith Reid is the one who wanted me to join in on some of the sessions Peter and Keith had together. And Tim Lane, of course, is part of that, too, at that time. Actually didn't feel very comfortable doing it. It's not my specialty to go out and improvise.
Yeah,
I felt a little in the back seat there. But having worked with Peter, and I've told him this numerous times, Peter has a kind of a split personality. He is a great bass player, rocker, and whatnot, and then all of a sudden he's like turning the page, and he becomes this very romantic, flowing, dreaming person with these long phrases and a lot of air and whatnot. And that didn't gel with me in the beginning because I said, how can you do that? He's a hard-nosed rocker, and then all of a sudden he comes into the studio and he wants to make sleepy music, you know. And for me, that's not a problem. I have had all kinds of people come into the studio, but I'm glad Peter came.
I'm going to follow up on that, and then, Peter, I've got another question for you about your music. But, Ivar, you've been around the musical block. You've done amazing things in the classical world. I've decided to call it the Phippen factor, PH on both of them. How's the Phippen factor added to your musical appreciation?
That's actually a good question. I am reminded of a former colleague, Rupert Holman. He was at the university teaching violin and directing the university orchestra. He said to me, you know, teaching is a two-way street. You part with information to your students, but you actually learn from your students as well. And yes, I have learned to appreciate some of the quirkiness, and I have thoroughly enjoyed working with him, and I incorporate some of that actually in some of my music. I'm setting up for making my own little CD.
All right, Peter. So Ivar brought up the fact that, you know, great bass player, rock and roller for years, noteworthy career in that. I think back to when you were doing all that. Maybe flutes of any kind may have been the furthest thing from your mind, or your curiosity, or your intention. Yet, you know what? The best musicians I've always thought are curious by nature. Does that fit? Was it curiosity that got the ball rolling for you with the flute thing?
Yeah, the way it was. Early March 1987 is when the bamboo flute came into my life and changed everything. Accidentally started playing bamboo flute. I thought it would be a good hobby. Of course, at that time, we were touring 300 to 320 days a year with the rock band. Every tour, I promised my wife I'd buy her something. She wanted a sofa. Oakwood Mall was fresh, brand new. There was a place called World Bazaar Gift Shop, and I bought a 25-cent bamboo penny whistle. Now, as you know, I played with Pete Raid in his avant-garde music group when I was not on tour. Pete heard me play that little bamboo whistle, and the next day he showed up with a bansuri from India, a long bamboo transverse flute. Shortly thereafter, Tim Lane gifted me a Japanese shakuhachi flute.
Oh.
And when we left town to go on our next tour, one of our first stops was Louisville, Kentucky. My keyboard player found a big, long alto bamboo flute for $1, and it didn't work. It was all cracked. Our next stop was St. Louis. I took it to a repair shop. When I picked that thing up out of the repair shop and played it, I didn't know what I was doing, but the light bulb went off in my head. Oh, the whole song is in this bamboo tube. You don't need any other instruments. And to me, that was like, wow, aha moment. And then I started playing it all the time. I wouldn't put it down. I mean, I'm still learning. Always a beginner.
It sounds as if it's other people's fault that you got into the flute. They just kept giving you flutes.
That happened. At that time, there was the New Delhi bread line.
I made new balls the other day, by the way.
Okay.
I missed those from the bread line, yeah.
Yeah, at that time, there was the bread line. So I knew from playing music for money since I was 12 years old that you learned quicker in front of people. I would book myself for little or nothing to play the bread line as a flute player, and I'm sure I wasn't very good, and people had to suffer through it. But people started giving me flutes from all over the world. And from 1987 to 1988, suddenly I had 40 flutes. And I started going to the library and trying to find books on them, how they were played. And I just kept playing and playing and playing. I won't say I practiced, I played. Yeah. I tried to keep what I knew about being a trained musician out of my flute playing. I didn't want my musicality involved in my flute playing. I wanted my flute playing to be spiritual, not technical. I still try to walk in both worlds. I think sometimes I drive Ivar nuts trying to be spiritual, but yeah, you still have to be musical too.
That's the voice of Peter Phippen. He's got a new CD out. It's called Into the Ancient. And also on the line with us, Ivar Lunde Jr., and they do a lot of amazing things in the studio together. The release uses the word chimerical, which means existing only as the product of unchecked imagination. In fact, I want to read a sentence from the first paragraph of that release. The captivating collage of the flute's translucent chimerical whisper and subtle electronic sound images. It's a shimmering panorama illustrating the gauzy veil of perception that separates our present state from the airy world of the spirits. That would lead one to believe, Peter, you enter that twilight zone between the here and the wherever every time you play the flute. Does that happen?
That's my goal. I want my flute playing to be totally spiritual, but you do have to have technique, and the more technique you have, the more you can forget about it when you're playing nothing. Because people say, oh, what did you just play? I don't know, I just played nothing. Ivar's going to have a different answer than I am for this one, so you might want to hit him up.
Oh, yeah, he's not off the hook.
Ivar and I were talking about the last song on the album, Beyond the Veil, for a week, 2 weeks. I kept listening to it. Now when I hear it, I think it's one of the best things I've ever done. I'm way too close to my own music, and this is where Ivar helps.
So, Ivar, on this album and others, you add the electronic factor?
Well, I thought that Peter needed something new. I did not know the people contracting him to do the CD was basically interested in him, and I was just to provide a recording of it. I thought maybe I could contribute some other things to it to make it a little different from what he has normally been producing. And I did. And he liked it, except for one of the two pieces. He actually wanted to throw that piece out, which we do sometimes. But I said, Peter, that's a nice piece. No problem. I can just add a drum to it or something like that. And it will be quite interesting.
How do you guys guys build the music? You sit there late at night and...
Well, Peter comes in, and he always talks about his experience with Kenyan Records. He goes in, records, and leaves. Now, Peter would like to do the same thing here, but he can't stay away. So he always has something to say about the final product. But, in this case, he came in, recorded. I think we did it in one take.
Everything's pretty much one take, one run through.
Cool.
Yeah, and then he leaves, and then I sit there and say, now what the heck can I do with this? Can I do anything with it? Should I do anything with it? Mm-hmm. So that's what the approach was.
For the most part, that collaboration works. Peter, you show up. Hey, nice going, Ivar.
Yeah, but like on that one piece, Beyond the Veil, I try not to have Western ears when I play these old flutes. And, well, let's face it, I was a product of the late 60s and all the 70s and 80s, and can't help but have Western ears. And I don't want to have them, and I'm trying to get rid of them. Ivar seems to have, and Nanette, too. Ivar and Nanette both. And many years ago, well, not many, 5 or 6 years ago, I forget what it was, what song it was. Something when Enrique Rueda was playing harp on it. I was playing a Japanese flute, and the fundamental, I thought that note was flat. And perhaps it is, but every time I would talk to Ivar about it, I said, everything is great except that last note, and Ivar goes to me, I love the shape of that note. So after we've debated this for an hour or so, or, half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, I asked Nanette to come in and listen to this note, and she is oblivious to our conversation. She doesn't know what we're talking about. So she comes in, and I say, that note, Nanette, and she said, I love the shape of that note.
The shape of that note.
I surrendered. I give up. Okay, it's fine. And on Beyond the Veil from Into the Ancient was like that. But I'd go home and I'd listen to it and I'd say, there is a vibe to this song. And Ivar kept saying, I can change something. I can change something. And now I listen to it, I'm thinking, this is one of the most interesting things I've ever done. Don't touch it. Now, if it wasn't for Ivar, it wouldn't be on the album. And neither would the opening track, Northern Lights. I thought it was an outtake. And Ivar said, Peter, Digital World, put it on there. So I buried it as an inner album cut. When I sent it to Projekt Records, the owner of Projekt Records, Sam Rosenthal, he tells me, wow, we'd really like to start with track 10. And I'm like, what is it I'm not hearing? And obviously Ivar heard it, and the president of the record company hears it. So I say, okay, let's just start with that song. What do I know? It's all about surrendering, and I'm following the music, and I don't want to impose my will on the improvisation. And it's funny because I was trying to not do that in the 1990s and early 2000s, and oftentimes I did impose my will on the improvisation, which ruined it. So on this album, I tried to stay away. There was a couple little things that I kept making Ivar turn down. Take away. But other than that, the playing stands as it was.
Cool. The CD is wonderful. We've already sampled a piece of it. We'll sample another one as we leave. It's called Into the Ancient. I describe it as ethereal because it makes me feel like the people who are playing it and building it in the studio, it feels like it must reveal things to you. When you get done with this, you feel like having a cigarette or something. I don't know. No.
Well, it's as much Ivar's album as it is mine.
Yes, well, certainly.
He arranged it, and he's a co-improviser, so I guess that makes him co-composer.
Yeah.
And, it's as much Ivar's album as it is mine.
It's a wonderful collaboration. Where can we get the CD? Any
download or streaming service.
Okay.
Projekt Records Bandcamp site, if you want to download it, or iTunes or Amazon, of course, or Spotify, Pandora, Deezer.
Cool.
No CD, no physical product.
CD. Okay. I'm an old dog. I love CDs. I have a whole bag of them downstairs. I was just looking at the other day. I was thinking, what the hell am I going to do with these? Tile the floor with them, maybe. Peter Phippen, thanks. Nice job on the album.
Thank you, Al.
And Ivar, wonderful collaboration. Thank you.
You bet.
That's just a bit of that final track, Beyond the Veil. From the musical compilation, I keep wanting to say CD, but I'm not going to. Musical compilation, Into the Ancient. Peter Phippen and Ivar Lunde Jr.